and then say there's no money for education. In LA County, we spend $237,000 a year to incarcerate a juvenile. We spend $11,000 to educate one. Something is wrong with these priorities. The investments are going completely in the wrong direction. And so I'm glad to see CABE, again, a leader in the field, boldly calling for a shift in direction. And now we need to make sure the politicians follow. I realized a long time ago, politicians are not leaders. They're followers. They look at polls, and then they try to get out ahead of the polls. And right now, we know the politics facing the country are bizarre and dangerous. Bizarre and dangerous. Now, we are one of the few countries in the world that takes pride in only speaking one language, and not very well. I get to travel around the world, and I go to a place like Curacao. Curacao, the average person speaks 4 languages. Spanish, Dutch, Papamiento, English. They're not even related, they think that's normal. All over Europe, you see people speaking multiple languages. In Africa, Asia. I was on a panel recently in San Diego with some students. And yeah, San Diego. San Diego's doing good things right now, so I wanted to watch San Diego. And, a student from Vietnam was explaining how she was struggling with her Spanish class, which is required for graduation. She said, I wish that the district would give me credit for the 5 other languages I speak. I turned to the superintendent and said, maybe you should. Maybe you should. Maybe we need to acknowledge that the cultural diversity of our children, that the language they bring is a resource and not a deficit. You know, the superintendent Gundry, did I get it right? Started with his bilingual story. Let me start with mine. My father's from Venezuela, my mother's from Jamaica, born in New York. That only happens in New York, that combination. Father, Spanish speaker, mother, an English speaker, so we spoke English at home. We moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, thinking that we were going to get into better schools. But when we get to schools in Long Island, the district looks at our names and assumes we're Spanish speakers, and therefore assumes we should be in special education. Because that's the equation in many places still, that not speaking English is actually a disability. So both my brother Felipe and I are placed in special ed. I'm only 6 at the time, so I'm okay with it. It's coloring, it's no problem. My brother Felipe is older, so he knows something's wrong, so he goes home to tell my parents I'm in the wrong class. But being immigrant parents, what do they say? They say, behave yourself. Do what you're told. Because immigrant parents trust the schools at their own peril. The next day he comes back, he says again, Papi, I'm definitely in the wrong class. My father again says, look, Pao, right? So we don't play. So the next day he comes and the paper airplane, he shows it to my mother, and she says, what's this? She said, that's what I did yesterday. So then he says, okay. My father was a police officer in New York City. He says, I better come to school in uniform. So he shows up. And he says, I want to see the class my sons are in. And say, you don't need to see the class. This is a very good school district. We know what we're doing. We've got them in the right class. He said, no, I want to see the class. I want to see what's going on. So reluctantly, they take him, and he sees and they see nothing is going on, because special ed is a holding tank for children they don't want to serve or don't know how to serve. And so he insists right away that we get moved. They said, well, we'll have to test them. He said, we'll test them. So they test us. And according to their test, now instead of being special ed, we're gifted. My brother Felipe ends up going to Harvard, I end up going to Brown. had my parents not intervene. And I'm glad to hear their parents today, because when parents do not intervene, when parents do not watch, when parents do not hold the schools accountable, that's the accountability we should be after. Very often the children don't get what they need and deserve. One of the things they need is the opportunity to engage in deeper learning. I know the Common Core has become a bad word out there politically. They think it's Obamacare for education. Most of the people who criticize it don't even know what it is. I'm not against the Common Core standards. I am against applying the assessments before you've actually trained anybody and gotten anybody ready. I hope John King, who you heard from, learned a lesson after the disaster he created in New York, because that's what he did there. That's why New York had more parents opting out of testing than any other state in the country. I was asked to sign a petition calling for him not to be appointed. I didn't. I'm glad to see a black Puerto Rican as the Secretary of Education. But I know this takes more than having the right identity to make the right policies. So we need to make sure, though, that even in our recognition that we've been using assessment wrong, and we have. We've been using assessment as a weapon, not as a tool. We've been using assessment to rank kids, to rank schools, to threaten teachers, to shut down schools, instead of as a way to make sure that our kids get what they need, which is what we should be doing, to diagnose learning needs. But the standards themselves make sense. And the standards actually offer an opportunity to bring equity into our schools in a very, very profound way. And so that's what I want to spend some time talking about with you today, is how do we pursue equity in education at a time of such profound inequality and at a time of such overt hostility towards immigrants? Because we know that that's in the air, and it's in our schools, and it's in our communities. We know that there are families that feel like fugitives, and children who are feeling the strains of the environment we're in. And so I don't want to pretend that doing equity work is easy, but I want to say it's essential. It's essential because if we don't figure out how to address the needs of all our kids, and by needs, I'm talking about both academic, psychological, emotional, social needs, because you can't separate the academic from the other needs. It's all in the same person. And what ends up happening is those with the greatest needs continue to be the kids least likely to thrive. You know, we're starting to realize slowly trauma is a need. Trauma affects our kids. You know, that there is research showing that we have children in cities throughout the country that have higher rates of trauma than veterans returning from Afghanistan. And it affects their ability to concentrate, it affects their ability to learn. It has a huge impact on their development as children. So we also have to recognize that our kids are not all the same. They learn in different ways, they learn at different paces. Equity is about understanding how to meet the needs. That's why it can't be reduced to a slogan. You know, we've lived with so many good slogans, haven't we? No child left behind. That was a great slogan. Except when Marion Wright Edelman came up with it, not the Bush administration, Marion Wright Edelman, the Children's Defense Fund, came up with the slogan, leave no child behind. They didn't mean you should test the children as frequently as possible. They meant you had to focus on health and nutrition and safety and all the things that we know, the things that Abraham Maslow said were the basis of child development. But somehow that's not part of the policy. Now we have a new law, every student succeeds. Another good slogan. No strategy to how to make them succeed, and no guidance to the states on what they should do differently. And now I see states all around the country with greater freedom, not knowing what to do, because every single State Department of Education in the United States is organized for compliance, not organized to help schools improve. We don't know how to do that. We know how to tell them they're failing. We can put letter grades. That was a great Jeb Bush intervention, right? They decided they're going to put letter grades on schools in Florida. So you can go to any school in Florida and you can find an A school all the way down to an F school. I would say if a school is designated an F school by the state of Florida and they still allow children to go, the state should be sued, right? I went to Edison High School in Miami, a triple F school. I asked the principal, how do you get to be triple F? He said, well, you simply failed the state exam 3 years in a row. I said, what happens if you fail again? He said, we will fail because 85% of our kids don't speak English, haven't been in the country long enough to learn it. They're required to take an exam in English in less than 2 years. I said, well, what happens if you become a quadruple F school? He said, well, now the state says they'll take us over. I said, are you worried about being taken over? He said, not at all. He said, I'm quitting at the end of this year, first of all. And you should know everyone described him as committed, hardworking, but beaten down by a system that just crushes people. He said, the crazy thing is the state can't take us over because there are too many schools just like us. He said, what's more, does the state of Florida know what to do if they took control? Is there some secret recipe they've been holding back on now for schools like Edison? What's the record of state takeovers across the country? It's one of complete failure. Complete failure. Compton was under state control for how long? Is it now the model for California? Every urban district in New Jersey is under state control with the exception of Elizabeth. When's the last time you heard Governor Christie take responsibility for his failing schools that he's in charge of? We have an accountability system that holds those with the most power the least accountable. Makes no sense. We have a population change taking place. At the same time, we have deep inequity. So as Latinos are the fastest growing population, they are also still the population that is lagging behind in education. And because they're lagging behind in education, Latinos are also lagging behind in wages. Which means that many Latinos across the country, not just in California, but across the country, are stuck in permanent low-wage jobs. That's the scenario. Education's got to play a role in changing that. And we can't afford to wait until we elect the right person as president or governor, because the fact is, we have a bipartisan problem in education. The Democrats have been no better. They've come up with the saying, race for the top was a disaster. There was no child behind on steroids. And so what we need is to make sure that we focus on equity, that we really focus on using assessment to help our children develop language proficiency in both languages or more. Because children need their primary language, don't they? We need to make sure that we are not dumbing down the curriculum for those we think don't have the potential because of some measure of their ability, which is typically what we do, isn't it? We not only dumb down the curriculum, but we also sort the teachers. We save the so-called best teachers for which kids? The ones we think are the most advanced, and we said the newest teachers, the least experienced teachers for kids with the greatest needs. Show me the research to support that strategy. There is none. We confuse the performance of our kids on standardized tests with their actual ability. We didn't even know if the kids actually made an effort. We didn't even know if they know how to type when they're typing in their answers. We don't know what the scores mean. But we treat the score as though it actually tells us something about a child's ability and potential. Because we are using the assessments in the wrong ways. And so we're going to have to make sure that we make